Hi there, and welcome to the next episode of CEO Conversations. My name is Shelly Weir, again, the president and CEO of FICPA. I am so excited for today's conversation around audit technology and am pleased to introduce our FICPA membership to a great friend of mine that I was recently introduced to a couple of months ago by one of our board members, and so excited to introduce everyone to Mark Edmondson, who is the CEO of a company called Inflo. We're going to talk a little bit today about audit technology, digital transformation, a bit about what Mark is seeing in his seat as CEO of Inflo, but also just want to say thank you to Mark and welcome to what hopefully is the first conversation of many that you and I will have together.
Thank you, Shelly. Looking forward to this.
And also, thank you for being a pseudo-resident of Florida now. I know that you're splitting your time between the UK and our beautiful state. So welcome, and we'll welcome you with open arms any time of year. So thanks for all your patronage here as well.
Well, when my family and I decided we needed to spend more time in America, it was only natural that we were gravitating towards Florida. I must admit, I do wear a couple of ears a number of times on my trips, and we love Disney. So it's fantastic to be able to spend as much time as we have been in the Florida state, and in my opinion, probably the best state in the US.
Yes, I love it. I love it. Well, let's dive into this. I'd love to just kind of ask you some broad questions, because you really are an innovator and a thought leader in this space. But I was looking recently at some research that you did around what modern businesses want from their audits. And obviously for our members in the audit space, whether they are small firms or large firms, staying relevant in this new digital world is really the name of the game. Can you touch a little bit on what that research showed and what you're seeing from your perspective before we dive into some of the more specific questions?
Absolutely. The research was really insightful. So we spent time talking to leaders in finance who are effectively the buyers of an audit service from CPA firms. And we really wanted to get a finger on the pulse understanding of what is it that they're looking for from their advisors, from their auditors, because we were very mindful of how much technology has advanced in the last number of years, so 3, 5, 10 years. And we're very mindful of that in the accounting sector, but it's not just the accountancy profession that's experienced this technology evolution. We've got every business impacted by this digital transformation that's going on. And what that research indicated was that the organizations that are being audited were embracing technology. They were utilizing it in their finance functions, in their broader operations. And they felt that CPA firms, their advisors, their auditors were really well positioned to be able to provide them with advice, expertise, perspective on how well they as an organization were embracing change and embracing innovation. But they felt there was something quite lacking, because the accounting firms, the CPA firms, weren't necessarily utilizing technology in the way that they were themselves. And so we were hearing a lot of things around, the compliance services that we're receiving are very comparable to what they used to be. They're quite labor intensive. They involve a lot of our time, of our efforts. They're very traditionally delivered, and we're not really seeing CPA firms utilizing the kind of technologies that we're seeing ourselves in our finance function, etc. So some really interesting insights, Shelly. There was a lot that we covered, and I'd recommend to anyone watching this really delve into that research and go that layer deeper than I'm able to here. But those are some of the key themes around the opportunity for CPA firms to add far more value to the clients that they're serving through leveraging technology and more innovative techniques.
Oh, it makes perfect sense. I mean, if you yourself as a client have invested in technology efficiencies for your own operation, it would sort of be like you asking me to go to the grocery store and actually buy my groceries in person versus using Instacart, if that's what I've gotten used to, right? So I can see why that would be, kind of a major theme that came from the research. And I'm sure that we could have 15 conversations about this question that I'm going to ask you next, but just broadly, if you're a CPA firm in Florida and you're just overwhelmed with what do I even do to begin thinking about this type of digital transformation in my audit function, do you have maybe any just key pieces of advice to get them started with it? And we'll dive a little deeper later in the conversation, but what are your thoughts?
I think first and foremost, it's around understanding your organization and what your attitude to change is. And I use the Rogers curve diffusion of innovation as a great way to frame that conversation. Do you want to be a firm who is on the bleeding edge of the latest capabilities? Do you want to be more kind of when everybody else is kind of going, well, I'll go, or do you want to be the last firm that embraces these kind of new techniques? And the thing is that none of those is necessarily the wrong answer. But actually being very mindful as a firm, what is your appetite to risk? What is your appetite to change? How comfortable are you with moving things forward? Some firms are very dynamic. They're making acquisitions, they're moving into new markets, they're adding new services. Others are more traditional and they're sticking to their market and what they do really well. And so I'd say first and foremost, Shelly, I'd think culturally, how are we going to approach this? Because most firms acknowledge that they are not going to be using the same technologies in 3 years that they are today. And as soon as you acknowledge that, what you've acknowledged is we are going to have to change.
Right.
Because if we're going to be on something different in 3 years' time to what we are today, we need to change. Then it's all about, okay, so how much are we going to change and how quickly? And your culture and the way you approach change is going to be really instructive as to whether this is going to be, well, maybe we should take it quite slow and we should bring things in piece by piece over the next 3 years, but we should probably get started quickly on that if we need to take 3 years. And others, it might be a case of, right, well, we're going to go big in this particular area this time, and then we're going to focus in this particular area. So that's the way I would think about it at a more macro level, is thinking about we are going to have to change. So how are we going to do it? Rather than thinking, well, do we need to change? Because I think that's probably an answered question at this point in time.
I think you're spot on there. I heard a quote recently. I don't know if you've heard this one as well, but I was at a conference and one of the, kind of leaders in the accounting profession shared that the accounting profession as a whole has changed more in the last 4 years than we have in the last 134 years combined. And it really resonated with me because just in the 4 years almost that I've been here, you can see that level of change. So to your point, it's a bit of, it's not anymore, are we going to change? It's what is our tolerance to that change and how aggressive are we going to be with it? And certainly that is rooted in what's best for each firm and their culture and in their strategies and what have you. So no, I completely agree. Well, let's talk just a little bit because we're going to have you on more of these videos and speaking at some of our conferences as well. So we'll have an opportunity to dive deeper into some of the broader digital transformation topical areas. But can you tell me just a little bit about your company specifically, the products that you guys have built and how you can assist firms in performing quality audits and tie it all together with what we're talking about with digital transformation? Because you guys have a product that we are so excited about here at the Institute.
Well, we love the enthusiasm that you've brought to the discussions, Shelly, and the FICPA team. Been fantastic talking about this opportunity for firms. And in a nutshell, Inflo is a cloud-based audit platform, and I like to explain it in simple terms. Of it does three things. First and foremost, it can replace the desktop audit software that most firms are currently using. So it can replace the desktop tool that we're using to document the audit. It can replace the audit methodology that we're following to perform the audit process. It has a trial balance capability. It has basic variance analysis built in. And that's the kind of entry level. Let's replace the old technology that we've got in the firm right now with something that's more modern and more in keeping with what we're trying to be as a firm today. Secondly, we can then enhance that process. And so what we're talking about there is using data more as part of the audit process. Mm-hmm. So that's things like pulling the data from the client's accounting system and starting to automate a lot of the things that we know that auditors will need to do, and help them make better judgments and better decisions by analysing all of the data using audit data analytics rather than sitting and sampling through long lists of transactions. And you can actually do those things independently. You don't have to replace the old audit platform that you've got to be able to start accessing some of these things. It could be an and or an or. And finally, we have what we'd call like the add-on products as well. So we've got a product that can help you with client collaboration, so collecting the prepared by client documents, and also the quality management standards that have been brought in recently. So helping firms comply with those new regulations that are going to be in place. All of that together is what we call the digital audit. So it's about moving from desktop to the cloud in terms of the technology that we're using, but it's also about using data more to be able to automate some of the basic activities and start to free auditors up. So instead of being, in my personal experience being an auditor, instead of spending a lot of time doing things that felt like it didn't need a human to do it, you can spend much more time on things like talking to the client, adding value and delivering a high quality piece of work.
Mm-hmm. Agree. Well, and I'm glad that you mentioned the QMS standards, because that is sort of the thing that's looming out there right here for our audit companies here in the US. We are just about at the 1 year point of when companies need to be in compliance for that. And I was just on a phone call yesterday with AICPA, and they shared that by their estimation across the US, the small firms, not the large national firms, maybe about 30 to 40% have begun the process, meaning that over half have not yet formally started it. And that's okay, right? But this is a good opportunity for where we can kind of help folks begin that process and think of it more broadly as part of their larger digital transformation as well. So great point.
And we can see that correlates very much with what we saw internationally as well, Shelly, because internationally, these quality management standards were brought in for audit firms a couple of years ago, actually. Mm-hmm. And in markets like the UK, Australia, it was very much left quite late in the process by a lot of firms. Mm-hmm. And like I say, that's okay as long as we have a game plan. What I would say is don't underestimate the amount of work that's going to be needed in that particular area. It could be a surprise, and it's not something you want to be finding out about in 12 months' time.
Absolutely. And you certainly don't want to rush, right? You don't want to rush and put it together haphazardly, which I'm confident that our firms will not do. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's got to be done. It is a new standard. The deadline is looming, and we don't want any of our firms, potentially failing their peer reviews. Because they weren't ready for those new standards. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. So anyone that's listening to this, I'm sure, wants to know a bit of specifics. And again, we won't drill too deep today, but what are those specific audit efficiencies? You mentioned some automation, for example, that your product can offer. Anything specific outside of what you've already shared that we should touch on?
Yeah, absolutely, Shelly. So to give some specifics, maybe just a little bit of context, what we're generally seeing is that in the old way of doing things in the desktop world, audit software was basically a filing cabinet full of Word and Excel documents. Mm-hmm. And that's fine, but it creates the problem when you're trying to do more when it comes to automation. Because if, for example, all of the data that you might want to use to automate a task is stuck within a Word or an Excel file, which is filed in a binder, it's quite difficult to penetrate that and get to that information. So firstly, at a higher level, a lot of the efficiency comes from moving to a cloud-based platform and using forms to be able to document the work rather than being so reliant upon Word and Excel files. Mm-hmm. Because once the data is in forms, or once we're using data more as part of the audit process, it unlocks that ability to use that data to drive automation. So a very simple example would be preparing lead schedules, an important task as part of the audit process, something that feels quite functional, and you can get a very junior auditor to do that work. But then updating that information as the numbers change or flow through where we've got adjustments and things like that can be quite actually, a secret time waster.
Mm-hmm.
And so something simple like lead schedules. You can also avoid duplicate documentation because there's a lot of linkage. So effectively, you document something once, and that information is presented in multiple different places. If you need to update that, you update it in one place, and it updates everywhere. And so you get away from the whole trying to chase updates around the whole file so as the audit is consistently documented. And then you can start to push things a little bit further than that and start to look at, well, with all of this data and with lots of auditors doing the same thing in the same platform, you can start to look at areas where perhaps we can provide recommendations as to what the right answer might be. So rather than you starting from a position of, right, how do I pick my sample or how do I find where the risk might be, the technology is able to point you in the right direction and not to necessarily take the decision away from you, because I think it's very important that humans are still the people who own those judgments. But if we can get you further along and give you more information to be able to make a better judgment, then we're going to start really elevating the way that the audit process happens. So there's maybe like 3 examples of how you can start to achieve both time saving, but also quality improvements through this approach.
I love that. It just, again, makes them more efficient and gets right in there. I imagine that there's probably some AI integration in there as well. What have you guys done there, and how does that work?
So we use a technique which we call Inflo hybrid intelligence, so Inflo high, because one thing that we've always felt, and this was almost before the recent wave we've had with ChatGPT and all the explosion of generative AI, was that from our perspective, there's lots of different clever ways of doing things, whether it's algorithms, machine learning, robotic process automation, all of these capabilities are out there. But from our perspective, what really mattered most was, okay, so what are you doing with that? And how can I use that? And how does that help me do an audit or do some other work? And so we've got an umbrella kind of term we call Inflo hybrid intelligence. And that's where we use these progressive techniques as almost like a little button in the platform. And so when you're faced with doing a task, you can do it manually, or you could press the Inflo high button and it will give you a recommended answer. And so that's the approach we've taken. And it's gone down really well because it both leverages these advanced capabilities, but also complies with the regulated market, because there is a recommendation. It is helping the auditor, but ultimately it's still their decision. They still review it. That's baked into the workflow. So as we make sure that they don't blindly follow these recommendations, but it also kind of achieves both requirements. Yes, we want to save time, but yes, we also need to comply with the regulations.
Very well stated. If you can accomplish both things, I think we are definitely winning the day, as they say. Last question for you before we wrap on this part of our overall series together. Software integration, we know, is the name of the game. Does the product do any kind of syncing with popular ledger software, like a QuickBooks, for example? I would imagine so, given the automation and connectivity that you guys have launched.
Yeah, we do it across 3 phases of the work, Shelly. So I like to talk about inputs, process, and outputs, if you like. So inputs, we're really integrating with, you named it, the likes of QuickBooks, but we can get accounting data, transactional detail data from any accounting system that a client is using. And so that unlocks a new opportunity to use that data from the client to change the work that we're doing. We can also hook into practice management systems or other technologies that a firm is using across their business. As part of the process, we've got built into the platform data analytics, client collaboration, and other things like that. But we've also partnered with companies like DataSnipper or Trulian or other people in the market who we think have got some great solutions, but we want to create a very seamless workflow so people can use these other technologies and really benefit from a best of breed approach rather than just being restricted to the technology that we've built. And then from an outputs perspective, we're really looking at how do we create reports automatically for the clients? How do we support the financial statements process? How do we help tax people doing their work? And so it's really around trying to create that end-to-end process where, yes, Inflo is the hub that we're doing a lot of the work, but there's spokes out to these other technologies that make life a lot easier.
I love it. Well, Mark, thank you so much for joining us today. I think you and I could probably chat for hours on this topic, and I'm so looking forward to having you back and introducing you to our members, especially those that, obviously are audit firms enrolled in our peer review and folks getting ready for compliance with the QMS standards and just really helping them navigate this next phase of digital transformation for the audit function. So I can't thank you enough. Could you just share with our members a quick, where can folks reach you if they have any questions?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you can reach me personally at mark.edmondson@inflosoftware.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn. I'll be posting lots of insightful content to hopefully help people navigate this change. If you want to learn more about the software and the company, inflosoftware.com is the website.
Perfect. Well, I can't wait to have you back again. I wish you all the best. Have a great rest of your week, and members, we will see you on the next episode of CEO Conversations. Have a great day.